Hey everyone, Sly47 here with the review of the Tier 10 Russian light cruiser Alexander Nevsky, or the replacement for the Moskva as of the last update, as if this has been recorded. Well, the last of the last, but whatever. So, what is it? What is it like? How does it work? Let's talk about it. So, first and foremost, let's kind of talk about the specs. Let's talk about what exactly, how it acts, how it is. So, it has 8 180s, so you actually have one less gun per turret compared to the Donskoy, but your guns fire twice as fast. That's actually pretty much it. That's basically the entire difference between the two. It's a super Donskoy with faster fire rate and maybe a few other buffs here and there that kind of change some stuff up. Now, is it a bad thing? No. Donskoy. I almost said Nesky. The Donskoy is an incredibly good ship. So having a tier 10 version that shoots faster and has a general buff and upgrade compared to the last, not a bad thing to say. But when it's at the tier 10 spot where the Moskva used to be, where, in that just engagement right there, I know with the Moskva, I would have walloped that guy with 9 of 9 rounds. I would have absolutely fucked him. And of course, I got a Citadel here, and trust me, this is a Colbert. There's another game I got a bunch of Citadels in with the Nevsky compared to the Colbert. It's an absolute just AP monster, but the beauty is that in comparison to the Donskoy, because of the fire rate change, now it's an HE monster as well. And what you're noticing is it's got good range, good AP, good HE, it's got one radar, decent accuracy, decent AA, okay maneuverability. Betting this is kind of starting to come up to what exactly this type of ship is. So, if I had to kind of give a full idea of this ship, I'd have to say it's aggressively average. It really is. It's just a basic cruiser. It's everything you want that line to accumulate, or can get to. It's it. You want good HE? Good. You want good AP? Good. You want okay torps? Yeah, sure. You want a skill that can keep DDs away from you? Great. You want to be able to rip through DDs when you want to? Great. You want to rip through CLs? Great. You want to start fires on battleships? Great. You want to challenge heavy cruisers? Perfect. And that was kind of, the more I played it, the more I realized that I was like, man, I just cannot break like 70k. I could not. Of course, I think my lowest damage in this ship is maybe 40 and such. Even with some of my first games when I didn't have equipment, didn't have this fully, everything rigged up with the blueprints and such like that. But when I was like, okay, I'm going to get a game for this review, and I'm going to get it good and such. It only took me 5 games. But all those 5 games, I averaged 60, 70, barely over 80k. And like that, and I finally got this one. And I was like, yes, finally! But the thing was, all those were really fun. Like, it really does everything well. I can challenge most other light cruisers. I can challenge most, even heavy cruisers at range. I can light battleships on fire and bob and weave because it does have decent maneuverability, though it probably does need a buff. Carriers, I do feel it needs a buff on its AA because I feel it should kind of be like a more gun-focused Worcester in that situation. But to me, I really do feel like this ship is just aggressively average. It does its job, it does it well, and it can kind of handle just about everything in this game. It's not a master of none situation. And as you can see here, it's like, you can surprise a ship that's got a decent amount of health, and just because of your fire rate, by the time they're even prepared, you've chunked them. You've chunked them a good amount. So for equipment wise, I would definitely suggest, at least in my opinion, turret traverse, but if you feel like the dispersion's just not right for you, go for a dispersion. I could definitely agree with both of them. Just Turret Traverses saved my butt a few times. So I view it just that way. And then, of course, the other two are your standard loadouts. Give it acceleration and rudder shift. That's it. Done. Pretty easy. I think right here, I think the dispersion probably would have helped, but there's other times that I feel like the Turret Traverses helped much more. But, I can't keep on wanting to redo, be like, yeah, but the Moskva would have wasted this guy back before it got changed. But at the same time, for a free to play, this is great. The grind is great. The Chappie, or the Shore, the Chappie, the Donskoy, all are really good ships. And of course, when I was playing them, I didn't really like them, but now I've kind of learned to kind of love fire starting ships, kind of focus a little bit more on the play between them and how to swap around when you're like, okay, I've started a fire here, start a fire over here, come back when that person's invulnerability is off, set another fire, have a little bit of fun. But yeah, with the Nevsky, I'd highly suggest it. But let's go to the thing that I'm betting a lot of people are looking forward to is how does this change my opinion within the tier maker? Does it move it up? Does it move it down? How does it go? And I'm just buying time to build up some, suspense. I know you love it. All right, let's go over to it. So during editing, I didn't really like the ending touch, so I'm redoing it for all. So where does this position change? How does it change on the tier maker? And also I kind of want to add in a little bit more onto it. So Alexander Nevsky does my games finally with it not bug change my opinion of it being in the solid rank. No, I actually think it just solidifies it. It's just a good cruiser. That's all. Like, it's kind of bland, but good bland, where, you're like, hey, I can always take it out. It's kind of like, always, with the Moskva, I always called it like the most solid sniper. You could do just about everything with it. Now, Alexander Nevsky, it's a good, solid HEAP radar cruiser that can hit everything and kind of deal with just about everything, and it's just good. It's always a helpful hand on the battlefield. It's always just there, and it can always pester stuff, and it's got enough health and enough range. And yeah, it could use a few buffs here and there. Probably a nice little AA buff, just a little bit, just kind of make it a little bit better. And then, of course, a little bit better turning, like almost like a half second off of the turn time. I think that would be just enough to kind of make it a little bit more nimble so I can dodge a few more shells from battleships at long range, kind of solidifying as that just long range, just killer and such. And then I want to have 2 radars, though I think maybe a special commander could fix that, kind of like how Kincaid fixes the DM or anything like that. I would personally just want one more radar at least, but at the same time, maybe a special commander, kind of similar to how the Minotaur is just solid, but when you put BD in it, it's just dang good. But yeah, my opinion, when you compare the Nevsky, when you're looking at other things, in the Stalingrad, it just does a lot of damage. It can tank a good bit, where the Pietro, it just pushes its damage, and it's barely solid. It's better than playable, but it's not in that same circumstance. But the Nevsky's just good. It's always going to be there for you, and the grind is, realistically, it's great. It's fairly consistent. I think the Donskoy probably needs a few changes, kind of make it a little bit more consistent, but at the same time, it's good. It's good. I'm going to stop saying it's good, and I'm going to go to the next part, because in my opinion, the latest update and kind of the latest news from Wargaming and NetEase is that basically they're listening. So I kind of thought, why not help them do a patch note to fix all of this and such. So I wrote all the notes on my phone, so 1 second. So first and foremost, to NetEase Wargaming, to kind of go over what I believe buffs and nerfs need to happen, is we need to move these ships out of meta and get them more into solid because they have competition. We don't want to nerf anything. We just want to buff things to make it so that basically everything's good. Just good. And that's all we want. That's all we want. So, let's kind of go through. I kind of went through all the ships in my own head, kind of just going, okay, what ships are good, what ships aren't, and how would one buff affect the other? So, first and foremost, Alexander Nevsky, I think its AA needs to be buffed to around the 6,500 to the 7,000 range. That puts it kind of in the Minotaur area, and the Minotaur can kind of keep its own on planes. It's still going to get hit a few times, but at least it's sending a few squadrons down with it, which is, in my opinion, where it needs to be. It kind of needs to be not as ridiculous as the Worcester, as a Russian style, but it just needs to be that general overall cruiser, and I feel like it just needs a little bit more. You could even go to buffing the AA skill itself on it, if that's a little bit easier. I think that also worked too. Of course, half second to a second off of rudder shift time, and one more radar would be great, if not a special commander for light cruisers. More money, I guess. You can kind of look at that. And just kind of going off of this kind of solid area, Pietro, I think it needs just basically, you need to remove the AA on it. I think its AA is kind of pitiful already. We already have enough AA cruisers, as much as I hate carriers. Let's just kind of roll with it and such. But that needs to be replaced with Sonar 1. Just one Sonar. Because then you have the captain skill to buff it and everything like that. That way you have a Sonar cruiser that's got rapid reload, one way to defend itself against DDs, or two, especially if you have the commander skill, and precise aim. Like it's going to be a damn powerful cruiser. It makes it more of a Stalingrad replacement. It makes, okay, Stalingrad's just a little bit better at AA, got tankier guns, but it doesn't have the fast reload, which of course with the Pietro, I'd say knock off 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds off its reload. Just, rapid reload 1 doesn't do much anything anyways, so let's fix up the Pietro and make it a very solid ship. It should be a terrifying ship to run into in terms of like it being like that super heavy cruiser, and we need to make it that way, where right now Pietros are not that terrifying at all. Sorry, it's not. One thing that I would love to do, Buffalo, actually give it a sonar, and I'd buff it right up to solid. Give it one sonar. Once again, just, you got the commander skill to get 2. Just give it a way to spot things and such. We don't need another radar on it, even though it has a radar tower and everything like that, but whatever. I think realistically, give it like I'm going to be moving everything around as how I would want them to be moved around. Des Moines, give it an extra like 5,000 health. Just give it just a little bit more staying power. I think it would be perfect. I think it needs to stay in niche. Nothing wrong with that. Henry IV, it just needs a little bit of an AA buff, in my opinion. I think that would be perfect for it, and I still want it to stay in niche because it is a very niche ship. Same thing with Venezia and Zao. I actually think they're generally fine. Venezia just crushes whatever it runs into in particular situations, but it still isn't a good, decent cruiser in other cases, like against battleships and everything. And then the Zao, maybe you could argue like a fuel smoke to kind of just give it one get out of jail free card. But even then, I think that might push it a little too far. Yoshino. There's 2 ways you could take this buff. Basically, give it more health so it can tank just a little bit better and stay alive to kind of make it just a little bit more user-friendly. Because I would like to have like the Zao in niche and then the Yoshino in solid. And the other way you could take it is you could make it just this. It's going to be a super powerful cruiser, but it's going to be like the Zao where it's got no armor. So give it rapid reload 2 and precise aim 2. Make it an absolute burst monster that's just much slower and easier to kill and easier to spot. So, hey, when you do have your skills up, it's a monster. When you don't, you might need to run away. So I think that'd be great. I think one or both of them, just given a little bit more health, I think would push Yoshino into a very solid position. So right here, I think we've got all of this. Now, kind of bringing up all these ships, Buffalo, Yoshino, in my opinion, when you bring up the Buffalo, the Yoshino, and you kind of give the buffs to the Nevsky and all these other ships, in my opinion, that immediately pulls the Moskva down. Because the Moskva is solid. It is incredibly solid. It's just, its guns are great. It's a whole good setup, but now you have a bunch of ships that are all a really good setup. So that pulls that right down. Then the utility, you're starting to kind of spread out some more utility throughout it, because once again, right here and right here, we now have, three. You got 3 sonar cruisers, a radar cruiser, and a radar cruiser. That makes the Worcester not so needed in that game, and pulls the Worcester down as well. I think that really starts to balance it out. Now, of course, you still have these 2 very sneaky right here, which we're going to fix, because we're going to buff the Puerto Rico, and basically Puerto Rico needs increased armor so it can tank just a little bit more and increase its health. Just make it tankier, because its guns are okay and such. But once again, that's another radar cruiser that's viable to shove into solid. And now you have another radar cruiser. Now the Minotaur doesn't have its main ability to just straight up beat you down in its smoke. You've got enough radar and enough sonar to spot it, which balances the minnow, especially when you have David Beatty in it. So it's still an incredibly solid ship and pushing meta, but I think that it definitely puts it into a definitely good situation here. Hindenburg, increase its range by a kilometer and a half at least. Make it the longest firing 203s in game. It should not have this basic okay range. It should have good penetration, push that up there, and it should just have the best 203s. That should be its shtick, and that should move it right into solid. Good. That's exactly what we want. Now, all of a sudden, we have a lot of competition here, and Hindenburg shut down the Smolensk very well. Puerto Rico's now can shut them down hard. You've got Moscow's, of course. You've got Yoshino's. You've got Alexander Nevsky's all right here, and I think that really balances out and puts the Smolensk down in solid. It's obviously still so freaking powerful, but you have ways all over here to spot it and take that sucker down, balancing it via the community, similar to how the Stalingrad is. And now the Stalingrad can just output damage. That's all it can do, but in a team, it's definitely incredibly good. So I think it still sits within solid, borderline niche, in my opinion. It starts kind of getting to that, like, maybe it might make sense to now move the Stalingrad down, because now you've got damage up the wazoo, ways to spot, everything like that, and the Stalingrad just shoots stuff, which is not bad. Once again, niche and solid are both good tiers to be in. So, next thing, let's hit this. Colbert. Remove the AA and give it 3 fuel smokes. Give it a way to survive, because these things are way too easy to kill and way too huge. Even in the fuel smoke, they're going to be easy to hit, but at least they have something, and personally, that would put it right up in the niche. That's all. Because it already has good AA. Doesn't need anything. Doesn't need any difference. Just do that. Boom. Done. Donzo. Perfect situation. Goliath, the one that needs probably the most love here. Which actually, I kind of figured that actually it doesn't need that much. It just needs something to give it that oomph. That little je ne sais quoi. So, buff its guns by 3 seconds. Yes, I said that. Put its reload down to around 11 seconds. It still's got big guns, so it should match up with Henry. But now it's a smoke fire cruiser that's a heavy cruiser and such. And then, of course, increase its range by 1 kilometer at the very least to make it competitive. And to me, just with all the ways to spot things, it at least moves the Goliath to playable. The problem is the entire idea of the Goliath is rough to say. It's got the 2-2 layout. It's got, even at 11 seconds, it's going to have the slowest fire breathers of this entire thing. So, it's just a rough ship to even think about, because in my opinion, like, oh yeah, we could just buff a bunch of little items and everything like that. And I think maybe it would fit into niche, because I think we have enough solid, and in comparison to all these other ships, they wallop the Goliath, but giving it that buff will at least make it playable and give it almost borderline niche. It's like, hey, I'm a smoke cruiser that's got fire and everything like that, where you only really have one smoke cruiser up here that has fire. Like, it does have its niche and such. I'm in my opinion, it's so easy to tier 10 to shoot, but I think if we had to, I think for the general players, when you're not dealing with players that specifically absolutely crush it in, being like, oh, you're shooting in the smoke. Well, it has a slow fire rate, so it might be harder to see. So probably puts it right up into niche. And I think this would be perfect. Just those changes. They're actually very small, in my opinion. So to kind of balance everything out, Wargaming Eddies, I think this would be perfect. I'll put the whole thing down below to kind of give you ideas. And if anyone else has any suggestions to kind of help, hey, maybe this ship does need a little buff, put it down below. Let's talk on Discord and like that. Once again, thank you to all the supporters on Patreon. Yeah, they're awesome. And hopefully you liked the video and liked these potential changes that I'd love Wargaming to actually enact, because I think this would put the cruiser meta in comparison to each other. Because of course, yeah, I know Vermonts, yeah, I know Republics and like that, and Kremlin needs a buff, Conch needs a buff, but at the same time, this puts it in a dang good situation. So, hope you all enjoyed the video. Have a good one. Peace.